Hi, today I'm speaking to Simon Newstead of RBS, and we're going to talk about, of course, Sepa and payments regulation. So now that we have the publication of the Sepa regulation, has this really brought, the much needed planning certainty to the market that everyone thought it would?
I'd say yes, but not completely. So in terms of the yes, the fact that we have the regulation, the fact we have certainty on the February 2014 end date, massive positive, and it's exactly what the market's been waiting for. And in a sense, the market's been almost holding its breath over the last couple of years, waiting for this moment to come. So hugely positive. The bits, I guess, where we haven't yet got complete certainty, I probably mentioned three areas. The first is, as with any piece of legislation, understanding and in a uniform way every word, every line, every concept's hugely important. And there's still a little bit of work to do to understand what some of the articles, some of the provisions mean in detail. And that's something, certainly from an industry perspective, it's vital we have a common understanding, and it's vital that we play that understanding back to the Commission in particular and make sure our understanding is in line with theirs. So that's something that we're working on currently through particularly the European Banking Federation, its payment regulatory expert group, which we're very involved with. That's working on some interpretation, and also the EBA is working on its own guidance document. So that's very important. And another area as well is around what member states decide to do around the various options they've got in the regulation. Because there's a number of areas where they have, for example, for smaller schemes, for niche schemes, they can take a couple of extra years, and there's other options as well. So from a planning perspective, the sooner we understand which way each of them will go, the sooner we get that piece of planning certainty in place as well. And then the third point is, of course, it's important that when individual countries and communities of PSPs are doing their implementations, there's as little fragmentation as possible around how the XML, the famous XML ISO 20022 standards, how they're used in practice, and also around this concept of additional optional services. It's making sure that whilst there may be very good cases for having them in some places, that they don't disrupt the interoperability that we need. So I'd say once we are over those hurdles and we have clear understanding of the interpretation, we have clarity on member state intentions and clarity around things like AOSs, that coupled with the regulation, and the regulation, as I said at the beginning, massively important because it's given us, it's fired the start gun for all of this other work, then I think we'll have full planning certainty.
I mean, yeah, those 3 points you brought up, I mean, it's really a lot about communication within the industry and between banks and clients, isn't it?
And communication right now, massively important. So that's communication, whether it's between the PSPs and the Commission and member state authorities to make sure we have a common view. It's communication between banks like RBS and our client base. The level of communication, the level of dialogue is already gone up a number of notches since the 31st of March. Not that far off now, but that's when the regulation entered into force. Because these conversations now have moved from the theoretical to the very real.
So what do banks and their clients need to be doing right now?
Number of facets. I think those that haven't really dipped their toe in the Sepa water yet in terms of investment, in terms of business case, in terms of migration plan, now's the time to start doing the real serious planning. Those who've already active to some degree, it's making sure that any solutions that they have in place are scaled up to the volumes that will come as we move towards the deadline for migration, so 214 or 216 for niche schemes. And then the other part of it is, of course, again, back to the dialogue point, it's making sure that customers, originators talk to their customers, they talk to their suppliers, so we have a managed migration process with transparency and no surprises. So it's back to traditional practical planning disciplines, having got a date, an end date for a project. It's making sure that the project plan is well informed, has clear milestones, and that the right internal and external parties are involved in the process.
I mean, yeah, we can talk about Sepa for a long time, but Sepa, of course, isn't the only regulation out there. So what are some of the other payments regulations affecting Europe or globally, and how does it really fit in with Sepa?
Well, if we just stick to, global regulation, we could talk about all sorts of different dimensions. If we stick with the payments market in Europe and EU in particular, as you've just kind of alluded to, there's a number of other developments happening in parallel to Sepa, actually quite a few other developments. Just sort of citing a few, the Payment Services Directive is under review this year, as is Regulation 924, as is the Electronic Money Directive, and then of course there's a major initiative that the Commission has been running with a consultation that closed on the 11th of April, so only last week at the time we're recording this. And that was a consultation on a green paper that they've produced on electronic, mobile and card payments. And that is a very broad consultation looking at the landscape for those things, looking forward to the EU's digital agenda and starting to look at what might need to change and what the goals would be to sort of move the payments market in Europe sort of into the digital agenda. And all those things have crossovers. There are cross-references between all of these different things. So there are things in the green paper that relate very closely to the PSD review. There's a couple of references in the Sepa regulation to points that will be picked up in the PSD review. The Sepa regulation in itself changed Regulation 924. So there's a web of connections between these things. And I suppose for me, the underlying conclusion of that is that there's a bit of a one-off opportunity now because all these things are up for renewal or implementation all at the same time. There's an opportunity to look at the totality of this and think about the overall vision, if you like, for where this is intended to take the EU payments markets. I think it's very positive that all these things are being progressed. And a great opportunity to think about the totality as well as the individual initiatives on their own.
So 2012 is the year of payments.
I think we've said this before, but this is definitely the year of payments in 2012. Yes, Liz.